We're live. We're up? Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am your host, Kevin Mears. We are joined once again by the amazing
Brian McKinley, author and godfather of vampire thrillers.
Baron Voltage, aka Chris, is at a convention in Baltimore and will not be joining us this week. He will be back next week. We got a bunch of announcements, particularly because we finally managed to schedule somebody that we've been trying to... Oh, let's see, I've been trying to actually schedule him since I first started doing the YouTube channel. But first of all, so next week we're going to be doing creepypastas and urban legends. Particularly, we're going to be talking about the latest Momo phenomenon, where we'll get into more details next week. But it's this app thing where supposedly people are being told to hurt themselves. We're going to get into that. We're going to, is it a spirit? Because I've heard that. I've heard it's other things. We'll get into all that next week. For those of you who are wondering, we are going to be having Kyle Curtis and Steve McRae from Non Sequitor Show on in the near future. We're working on a date because we've had a bunch of scheduling conflicts, but it is coming. February 21st. And this is the one I'm excited to announce because, again, we've been trying to do this for about 4 years. We're going to have Louis Lovehog, a.k.a. Linkara, of the YouTube channel by the same name, Linkara, on. He does Atop the Fourth Wall, where he reviews a variety of comics, mostly. He's also done video games and movies and PSAs and a whole bunch of other things. He's a good guy. He has a really great channel. Then again, been wanting to get him on for ages, so I'm looking forward to it. But before we get into tonight's topic, we do need to honor our first sponsor, which is, of course, Audible. Audible is a great resource for anyone out there like us who likes to read, who doesn't quite have the time to sit and read an actual book. It's audiobooks. There are tens of thousands of audiobooks on Audible, fiction, nonfiction. Some of our past guests are on there for Dacre Stoker's books. All three of Brian's books are there. And dang it, I'm forgetting her name.
Oh, Carrie Vaughn.
Yeah, Carrie Vaughn. The Kitty in the Midnight Hour books are all on there. If you go to audibletrial.com/paranormally, audibletrial.com/paranormally, link again is always in the description, and it'll be pinned on the YouTube comments if you forget. You can get a free audiobook with a month. You can cancel it at any time with no obligation. You get to keep your audiobook. If you do that, it's a great service. I definitely recommend it. I'm currently working a shift where I work long hours by myself. It's nice. I mean, I can read a book, and I do, but it's nice to have actual background noise occasionally when you're by yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not a big music person, believe it or not, so I prefer books. So, okay, that's our first sponsor. That's what's coming up. So tonight's topic, since I did actually sort of forget to mention who I am, in case anybody's forgotten at this point, or in case there is one other thing we should do. But in case you are new or have forgotten, I am Kevin Mears, demonologist and paranormal investigator. And tonight's topic, in point of fact, is demons.
Ooh.
We're going to be talking about Christian, Jewish, and Islamic demons. We're going to be talking about non-Christian demons as well.
Mm-hmm.
Brian's got some notes because he has been good enough to do some homework.
Yes.
I also did want to say real quick before we get into our topic, we are now at 494 subscribers.
Which is great.
Which is absolutely amazing. I want to thank all 494 of you, both the ones that have just joined us recently and the ones that have been here for a while. I want to remind you guys to like, comment, share, subscribe, because when we reach 500, and we're close, six subscribers away, Baron's going to do the Hot Wing Challenge.
Better him than us.
Yeah, good heavens. And I'm looking forward to enjoying his torment. But, okay, so tonight's topic, demons. This is where the show began, and it makes sense after a year of running through various crazy things as well as demons to come back to it, I think. Um, the one thing I think it's good to start off with is, as we're going to show tonight, demons is not a uniquely Judeo-Christian concept by any stretch of the imagination.
No, there are evil spirits in almost every culture in the world.
And there is more specifically, at least in my experience, there's what I broadly characterize as a demon, as a Christian demonologist, and that's also a pretty common idea, because when I say a demon specifically, I mean what I call a negative inhuman spirit. Negative is real straightforward. It's something mean. It's something evil. Inhuman is it's not a living. It's not the spirit of the dead. It's the spirit of something else. It's something more specifically. Usually, traditionally, it's a spirit that has never been a living creature of any kind. So it's not like an animal spirit gone bad. But that idea of inhuman spirits by various names is not a uniquely Christian concept either.
No.
There are certainly ideas in other cultures that sound very much like demons that are human spirits, like the Jewish Dybbuk. Although the history of the Dybbuk is an interesting concept thing, and we're going to get into that. But demons, like I said, it's hardly a uniquely one or another thing. We have records of evil spirits as far back as we have cultures to record them. I mean, Babylon, Sumeria are the oldest known cultures in existence, and they had demons. This is a common mistake Christians make, and Jews to some extent, because the Bible goes into this as well, is this idea that Babylon worshipped demons. It's not correct insofar as all the Babylonian gods were demons. It's not entirely wrong either. There's a demon that's become very famous in the West, for example, Pazuzu, from the Exorcist movies.
Yeah.
He is a Babylonian god. But among other things, he's a god of disease.
Yeah. Well, and that happens a lot. Future cultures take the gods of the past and turn them into demons.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, that's sort of a cultural phenomenon.
In fact, one of the most famous demons is an example of that, which I was going to get to in a moment.
Good opening for that.
Yes. No, this is why you and Chris are going to work. You keep me on my toes. Plus, you did some serious. I can see from the notes you did some serious homework, just like you were asked to. So you're going to have plenty to contribute. I'm just trying to set the stage by going back to the oldest and then branch out. But Pazuzu, what's interesting about Pazuzu, particularly in light of The Exorcist, is one of his other jobs, aside from being a god of disease, was a protector of children. Particularly from a much darker figure known as Lamatsu, who's thought by some archaeologists to have been inspiration for Lilith, because she comes in the night and she murders children. Lamatsu was his wife.
Yeah.
So there is a theme that's recurrent in the movie The Exorcist of evil fighting evil and how this doesn't end well. So I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but there has definitely been talk that no, it wasn't that he just picked Pazuzu out of a hat. This idea of, well, he's always fighting his wife to protect children. Yeah, it's called William Peter Blatty, who wrote the book, and I believe he wrote the screenplay as well.
Yeah.
Did his homework on Babylonian demonology, as well as certainly he did his homework on exorcism. In case in point for anyone who doesn't know, there were two Jesuit technical advisors on the movie.
Yeah.
Now, Brian brought up an excellent point about how one culture's gods become another culture's demons, and vice versa for that matter. But what you run into in particular is probably the most famous demon outside of Satan himself, Beelzebub. I was actually just researching this earlier today, refreshing myself earlier today, because of another YouTube channel I was commenting on. But Beelzebub comes from Baal, who is a Canaanite god, who's mentioned by name in the Bible. And the Jews in particular did not have a good relationship with the Canaanites, particularly with God of the Philistines. And, some of us may remember that from Samson, for example. But the name means Lord. And when you add Zebub, that means flies, hence Lord of the Flies.
Oh.
So I just
more
think
like Beelzebub.
Yeah, but over time it's changed and evolved. And the reality is, Christians get the main flack for demonizing other people's gods. And in fairness, Christians did this a lot.
Yeah, especially in the Middle Ages.
Oh, yeah. But the reality is, other people did it. And just about everybody's done this at some point. Case in point, the Jews borrowed Beelzebub. There is speculation, although it's unconfirmed at this point. I find it suspect, to say the least, that Lilith herself, who is originally a Jewish demon, and we'll get there in a second, was originally a Syrian goddess. And there are the oldest records I've ever found, aside from the possible connection to Lamatsu, as Lamatsu being a child killer, is that there was a type of demon in Babylon known as Lilithu.
Yes. That came up in my vampire research.
Yes. Because Lilith and Lilithu are closely tied to the succubi, which are deeply tied to the vampire legends.
Yeah.
Dear heavens, those legends about succubi get weird in the Middle Ages. I do want to acknowledge the chat real quick. We have Maureen Lynch, who's joined us. She runs a group called JSA Paranormal. Wants to do a show together. And in any case, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that, Maureen. We'll talk about it on the air when we have a chance.
Yeah.
Mostly because that was not the best time. Unless you want to call in, obviously. Yeah. Although she just said she had to go do dinner, so we'll discuss this at another time. But pretty much the origins of Christian demons come from Jewish demons, and the origin of the idea of Jewish demons very much probably owes to Babylon, Samaria. Given a lot of things in all culture relate to Babylon, Sumeria, the oldest civilizations in the world.
Yeah.
And again, they were worshipped. Some things that people later would see as gods were worshipped, or seen as demons were certainly worshipped as gods there. Which would be that, and the captivity in Babylon would probably be why the Jews demonized their.
It would make sense. So how did the Christian concept of demons evolve? Like Jewish and...
So, good question. Judaism has its share of demonic figures, most prominently Asmodeus, which is referred to in older Jewish texts as the king of demons. He's not, in the oldest stories about him, a fallen angel. He's just the king of demons, which relates to Judaism. And I'm not going to really try to get into this, mostly because I know I'm not enough of an expert on Judaism, but Judaism has a more complex view of God and God's benevolence than Christianity does.
Okay.
God isn't necessarily perfect, as all-loving, perfect, and power as in Christianity, which you kind of see in the Old Testament in the fact that he gets a little vindictive.
Yeah.
I mean, he describes himself as a jealous God. But towards the point when the Romans conquered Israel, this is pretty late. This is still before the 1st century CE, if you want to use the modern terminology. Judaism started to develop the idea of these fallen angels. The biggest point in Jewish thought that they come up is a book that's apocryphal, which is it's books associated with the Bible that aren't actually part of the Bible. But it's called the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
Which
Heard
is
of that.
Yeah. Enoch is, of course, a figure from the Old Testament that ascended to heaven on his death. The Book of Enoch is supposedly relates to all of that and tells the story of figures known as the Watchers, or sometimes the Grigori, which were angels that were given the task of watching over humanity. Genesis 6, verse 1 through 4, I want to say, talks about the sons of God that lusted after the daughters of men, who had children with these women that were men of renown, men of huge size. In fact, one of the most well-known names, of course, for them would be the Nephilim.
Yeah.
One of the other names for them is the Anakim. If you follow this down to the book of Numbers, Goliath, the infamous giant that David slew, is called an Anakim. There's a really interesting video, and sadly I forget the channel. I'll have to look it up and put a link, that was talking about this other concept you run into, which is called the Divine Council, and the fact that Judaism at this point is more henotheistic than monotheistic, in that they believe that Yahweh was the god of Judaism, but Baal, for example, was the god of the Canaanites. If you were a Jew, you didn't worship Baal because he's not your god. But if you're a Canaanite, you didn't worship Yahweh for the same reason.
Right.
It wasn't that they weren't both actually gods. It was, you have your god, I have my god. We don't mix. Which is also why there are verses in the commandment is not, there are no other gods. It's, I am the Lord thy God, that you'll have no other gods before me. Right. And there's also places in the Psalms that get into this. And so, which comes into one of the things I want to talk about, of course, which is, where do demons come from? Because this is one of the most common questions I've been asked over the years. And it's like, well, the short answer is, we don't know.
Right. A lot of people think, fallen angels.
Mm-hmm. But even there's the question of, okay, they're fallen angels. Why did they fall? So one of the most well-known theories, and even a video I did way back at the beginning of this channel called The Origin of Demons, somebody commented, was, wait, I thought demons were the spirits of the Nephilim. So there is a school of thought that you have demons and devils, and you have demons were the Nephilim, the children of these half-breed, these half-breed children of angels and humans. And then the devils, the higher-ranking spirits, were the fallen angels. I've also seen speculation that damned souls versus actual fallen angels. And then there's a whole series of other theories about what the Nephilim were. Children of Cain versus children of Abel. Priests versus non-priests.
Interesting.
But, so one Jewish explanation for where demons come from, and it's not the only one, is that is this group of angels. There is a figure that's referred to in the book of Enoch as Samael, which, if you'll remember from past videos we've done about angels, names that end in El or Al mean of God. Samael either changed his name or always was a bad seed because it means venom of God. But basically, he fell in love with human women. His followers fell in love with human women, and this sparked a war in heaven, got them all kicked out. And that's the Book of Enoch version. There's weirder Jewish version stories, like there's the story of the first creation. So if you read Genesis 1, 1:1, you have, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. If you read Genesis chapter 2, you have the story of Adam and Eve. The question here becomes, okay, so Genesis chapter 1, it says God created man and woman. In Genesis chapter 2, it says God created Adam by breathing on dust, and then took a rib from Adam and created Eve. The current Christian school of thought is, oh, well, it's just retelling the story and giving you more detail.
Yeah.
There's several older schools of thought, one of which was God created something before the humans. That was very wicked and evil. He wiped it out with the flood and started over again. Essentially, basically he created humans and he wiped out the first creation. Particularly, again, this children of God, sons of God, daughters of men, may be referring to this first creation interbreeding with humans. and wiping out these half-breeds is the reason for the flood. And the spirits of these half-breeds are where demons come from. The other explanation that's probably better known to modern listeners is, of course, the story of Lilith.
Right, which has undergone a lot of revisions
Oh,
and
good
changes
Lord, yes.
over the time. I learned that as I did research into Lilith.
Because everybody thinks that, just about everybody these days who knows the name thinks they know the story, which is that Lilith was a first wife of Adam, created to be an equal, and specifically Adam wanted her to lie under him in the missionary position for sex.
Mm-hmm.
She said no and walked out, and God sent 3 angels to bring her back, and she said, no, I'm out. Screw this, I'm out. And there's a tiff with the angels, and ultimately she swears vengeance on the children of Adam, and that's why she becomes a murderer of children.
Yeah.
If you go a little further back, though, this story isn't there. Originally, in the oldest stories that I've ever found, she's simply referred to as a demoness, and as a mother of demons,
Yeah.
and as a wife of Satan, or at least of the satanic, or Asmodeus, or whatever they are, satanic archetype you're dealing with is.
Yeah.
But her children may be another source. For that matter, there's stories that she had children with that. She basically snuck in later after Adam got kicked out of the garden and had children with him.
Yeah.
It's a screwy situation.
It gets all confused.
But, so that's another source. And then, of course, is the source most Christians know, which is that Satan led a group of angels that all decided, we don't want to do what God tells us to do no more.
Yeah.
And walked out, and there was a great rebellion, and Michael kicked his butt to the curb. But that's pretty late in the storyline. I mean, this more or less right around the time of Christ, a little bit before with the Book of Enoch. You start to get this idea of fallen angels, but the idea of Satan is certainly a figure in the Old Testament, and despite popular misconception, it's a specific angel, not just a job title.
Okay.
But he's not evil. He's not a fallen angel, and he's up there in heaven on God's right hand, basically serving as the prosecuting attorney.
Right.
You think humans are so good, but look at this. What about this? And what about that? The famous example of this, of course, being the Book of Job. It's like, well, yeah, Job's loyalty now, but that's because everything's going his way. We screw him over, he's not gonna be faithful.
Right.
Christians certainly reconcile that and say, no, he's still being loyal. It's just he's a nice guy doing a really lousy job. Which I still think Chris would have something to say about if he was here.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about that
before,
about that view.
But we're coming up at the end of the first half hour, and I was figuring the second half hour would be a good time to turn focus to you. So I wanted to touch very briefly on the other 2 players in the story of the Middle Eastern demon.
Okay.
Which are Zoroastrianism and, of course, Islam.
Go for it.
So Zoroastrianism is a very interesting religion that predates Christianity, though it's not as old as Judaism, in which you have 2 gods. You have Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. Ahura Mazda is the god of good. Ahriman is the god of evil. They are in some interpretations, in fact, brothers, but they're equal in power, opposite in morality. And they have a collection of demigods or angels and demons, realistically, that work for them. And this realistically, and it definitely influenced early Christian writers, because it was very prominent in the area at the time. It was Zoroastrianism, for those who don't know, is the major religion of Persia. What's interesting that you run into here is you have the Asuras and Devas. Devas in Zoroastrianism are demons. Asuras are the angels, basically. In Hinduism, you have Asuras, which are demons, and Devas, which are gods. But then very briefly, you get Islam on the scene a couple hundred years after Christ, which comes up with a new concept, which is the jinn. Because here's the thing with it that I at least find interesting in Islam, but then again, I find religion in general interesting. Oh, hello, Scott Longman. We have a listener in the chat from England.
Oh, nice. Hello.
But so Allah, which for the record, the name Allah means God. Specifically, I think it translates as the God.
Yeah.
You know, Arabic Christians also call God Allah. But Allah creates 3 sentient races. He creates the humans with Adam. He creates the angels, which are not given free will. They exist solely to do the will of God. And then he creates the jinn out of smokeless fire, who are also given free will. He goes to the angels and he goes to the jinn and says, you know, the greatest of these 3 creations is man. You all must bow before man. The angels bow because they don't have free will. Some of the jinn say, no, we will only worship God. And those angels, led by a figure known as Iblis or Shaitan, break off and become rebellious and mostly torment humans. But again, they're not. What makes it particularly interesting, at least to me, and different than Christianity or some aspects of Judaism, is they're not in rebellion against God. They still worship God. Because, again, their whole beef was, no, we will not elevate humans above you. But jinn are not necessarily evil, because, again, not all of them refused. What you run into, and where the story that we all know and love of Aladdin and his lamp, and if you read the original story, Aladdin and his ring, because eventually he loses the lamp, is that King Solomon, from which you may or may not remember from the Old Testament, who is the wisest of all kings, in Arabic lore, and for that matter in Jewish lore, he was given command over demons. In Arabic lore, he was given command over the jinn. And jinn that angered him got locked up in bottles or lamps and usually thrown in the ocean. That's where this whole idea of the genie being bound to the lamp comes from. And yet, yes, in some of the cases, if you freed it out of the lamp, it was bound to serve you, or it would serve you out of gratitude. There's my personal favorite story, which is a fisherman in the jinn, in which the jinn tells him that in return for freeing me, I'll give you your choice of ways to die. Which is far too long and complex a story for the time that we have. I highly recommend looking it up. It is in Arabian Nights. But that brings us pretty much to 7 o'clock. I'm going to give the number out, and then we'll turn the floor to you for the research you've done.
Okay.
So 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492.
All right. So the research I did was into Middle Eastern and Hindu demons and whatnot as well. I came up with some different stuff,
which is good, particularly because I know almost nothing about Hindu demons.
Yeah, well, it was interesting to read and to find out about. Mm-hmm. It turns out, as you were saying before, there's the 2 different major types. There's the inhuman, malevolent spirits, and they have those, and then they also have the sort of human spirits, who, because of reincarnation, are people who have done evil things in their life and come back as these types of demons and whatnot, to mischievous spirits to torment the living. Chief among those, my favorite, the Vatalas, which is a type of vampire.
Of course, it's a type of vampire.
Yeah. They come back, they inhabit spirits, they hang out, or they not inhabit spirits, they inhabit corpses. And rise from the dead and drink blood and hang out in graveyards and all of that good stuff. And this is the major sort of, Hindu concept of a vampire is the Vatala. So they have another one that is similar called the Pishaka or Pishachka. I'm probably saying this totally wrong.
I honestly don't. Again, you're in territory I know almost nothing about.
Yeah,
so
Pishacha. Pishaka or Pishaka.
Pishaka. I'm going to guess Pishaka. And
They're
wrong.
flesh-eating demons with bulging veins and red eyes. They assume many forms at will and can become invisible. They can cause insanity in their victims just by being present. So that's like one of their dangerous thing. They're purely evil, unlike most Hindu spirits, and they feed on human energy. So again, seeing little concepts that show up in other places and other types of demons.
Are they the evil reincarnated humans, or just purely
No,
human?
these are the ones that are purely purely evil, malevolent spirits, never human. The Vitalas are the ones that had been human at some point. Then you have the Rakshasa. Sorry, that's how that is. The main version of their creation is that they were created from the breath of Brahma while he slept, and they were cast to earth because they began eating him while he was sleeping. So yeah, there are different types of Rakshasa. They're all ravenous and bestial, but some are evil, some are good, and they fight each other a lot of times. A lot of times they're cannibalistic with fangs, claw-like fingernails, and flaming red eyes and hair. They can fly, cast illusions, and also turn invisible. So, fun types of stuff. This is what you find in Hindu mythology. There aren't a whole lot of. That was pretty much what I was able to find.
That's still really interesting, just particularly by virtue of knowing Hinduism and just how so many of their things are interesting takes, like Shiva.
Yeah.
He's the god of destruction, but he's not an evil god.
Right. Yeah, they have a much more sort of balanced, cyclical view of things.
Did you get it? Was that everything you found, or were you able to get any more?
That was everything I came up with when I looked up Hindu demons.
Fair enough. I can't speak for listeners, but I learned quite a bit more than I knew.
Well, that's good. That's the idea.
Yeah.
And,
if anyone has ever wondered why I keep Brian around, this kind of thing is why. If he doesn't know, he can do his homework.
But look more into it. There's got to be a lot more information than this out here. This was a quick sort of summary. I didn't know how much time I would have, so I prepared just a quick little overview.
And there's plenty more we can talk about with Middle Eastern stuff. So
yeah. Well, and I know you know so much stuff just kind of offhand that I figured we'd also be having Chris. We might be having Beth, talking about different types. So,
well, I'd say one of the other interesting things, I mean, there's a lot of commonalities in the folklore. I mean, one of the other things I find interesting, the idea of the serpent as a force of evil is certainly not uniquely Christian. The two obvious examples that come to mind for me would be Apep, a.k.a. Apophis, the Egyptian serpent that tries to devour the sun, who is far more of a dark figure than Set, because that's interesting. Most people in a lot of movies, when you think of the Egyptian god of evil, they go, well, Set. And it's like, no, depends on which dynasty you're talking about. Set was also the protector of a protector of Egypt and a protector of Ra from Apep. Whereas Apep, no, it's a giant serpent chasing the sun through the underworld, trying to devour.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot there redeemable.
There's no dichotomy there.
And in Norse tradition, you of course have Jormungandr, the world serpent, wrapped around the earth that's destined to cause Ragnarok, to rise during Ragnarok. And as I understand it, basically he and Thor get into a fight and kill each other.
That's supposed to be, the big fight there.
I don't remember off the top of my head if he's like half the other things that come out at Ragnarok, a child of Loki's.
Well, there's also, Fenrir?
Who is a child of Loki. Yes, the giant wolf who will devour the earth, the moon, and the sun, and devour Odin.
Yeah. Ah.
They're different?
Yes. Come on in, Beth.
I had never heard this before.
This is where your expertise comes in.
This is why I keep knowledgeable people around when I do the show.
Which one's this one?
3.
All right. So a lot of people don't realize it, but everybody interchanges Fenris and Fenrir. Like everybody tries to say the newest and babyest version of the Greek pantheon, and their workings are recorded, which is entirely actually not true. If you go far enough back in the Norse legends, I forget which order it is, but as far as I remember, Fenrir came later. There was originally another wolf called Fenris who had that position, but because of different regions and synchronicity. Synchronism.
No, you got it right.
No, synchronism is what I was looking for. It's kind of like the difference between symbology, which is not a thing, and symbolism. Love you, Defoe. Anyway, so eventually the titles got interchanged. It's a lot like when Beowulf was first put into written word. It was preserved and written as full as the legends as it could be, but the problem was a monk was writing it. Yeah. Which lost a lot of the context, and there's a lot open to interpretation. It's a similar method in that regard. Much like how in certain pagan circles, when it comes to which versions of the deities are we following here, there, or what have you, other people like the older traditional versions of the Greeks legends, where there's not as much taking advantage of females and just lowering their station and importance as was more prominently passed around, say, during the Renaissance and what have you. So it's a mixed bag, because some of the older legends get a hell of a lot hairier, whereas the newer ones are more condensed and easier to do so, but it's kind of like stepping stone books when you're first learning to read. It's nice to have the condensed versions, but it's also a good idea to go back to see where everything actually connects. Because we've all come across legend stories within our own pantheons, or in your case, the Bible, since you are the Christian of the group.
Yeah, and there's two versions of the flood story. Yeah. In the Bible, I mean, specifically in the Bible. Never mind the Upanishads.
Exactly. I mean, considering I myself think that a minor Sumerian trickster deity pretty much tricked Abraham into doing this thing, and thus it got out of hand, which that we can pick that apart another night. But it's something that would have happened anyway. And he died before he was able to get the joke off. But the thing is, the Fenris came first. He was one of the oldest of the first wolves, while Fenrir did come later and was of Loki. The original legends, if I believe correctly, Fenris was the one that Fenrir was the one that bit off Tyr's arm, and Tyr and Fenrir were going to have a bit of a conversation. However, Fenris was the one that was eventually supposed to be taking down Odin. But again, it's been a while since I've gone into this. We're going on something that I've come across and discussed with people practically 10 years ago. Yeah, fair enough. But it takes so long for everything to, traverse down.
Again, this is new information to me, so I find it fascinating.
Not a lot of people realize it, and in some texts, it's really, really vague, and even a lot of more modern researchers in the matter have a habit of interchanging, and it's not always clear where.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, if any of our lovely listeners that are across the pond and over further to the east would like to chime in on that, by all means.
If any of our listeners want to chime in on anything tonight, or in general, really, I mean, we're not strict.
Well, yeah, unless it's Crazy Lady from Vegas, in which case, turn your YouTube off first.
Yeah, anyone who's going to call in, please at least mute your computer first. Yeah.
Especially if you're going to roast us, because we want to know how hot those flames have to be for our s'mores.
And criticism is welcome. I mean, we just had somebody quote an atheist about how religion is regressive and atheism is the new and the better thing, and it's like, I didn't like the quote. I let it, but I just responded to it. I'm not going to delete a quote just because I don't agree with it. I just don't want you to don't call me an idiot. Talk like if you want to talk like an adult, argue with me.
Well, that's just it too. When it comes to something like that, it's like it's okay if you don't want to believe. Yeah. That's your life, personal choice. Guess what? everybody's designed and wired a certain way. Some people are going to be atheists. Some people are going to be believers in Christianity, Krishna, Inari,
Buddha,
all of them.
Something.
And that's perfectly fine because you've quoted it before.
Yeah.
Because the Bible has said something about, or there was a priest that pretty much said that everybody has their own designation and what they teach is about being a good person, which is the point of everything we're going through. And every religion has something similar to that.
Oh yeah, every religion has some version of the golden rule. Some of them are, my personal favorite is a story from the Talmud, because that one tells the Jewish version of it, and then has the funny story about telling the Jewish version of it. The Jewish version of the golden rule is, do nothing to another which you would find hateful if it was done to yourself. The legend is that a famous man came into a synagogue, asked to be convinced. He would be convinced to convert to Judaism if somebody could explain the entire religion while standing on one foot. He went to a very famous rabbi. The famous rabbi wouldn't see him. He went to a less famous but still fairly well-known rabbi who stood on one foot, recited what I just said, and then added, and the rest is just commentary, and they got off the foot and the guy converted to Judaism.
And the thing is, it's fun and it's fun going through certain legends and whatnot. Like, since we're on the topic of Norse, this is one of the newer versions of this particular tale, but I find it hilarious, especially with certain climates being what they are now. Essentially, the nice guy, man-baby technique that is most prevalent on gentlemen who feel entitled to women's affections.
Yeah.
And, of course, our star player is Odin. Whatever happens, I'm going to earn it. It's going to happen. So Odin was having court out by the well of poetry. And he starts going on about how women, are liars and cheats and deceitful and ba 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 ba. Not so different from the beginning of the series of Arabian Nights. And so he starts telling this story of how he went to go court a woman. And she kept rebuffing his advances, going, no, thank you. No. And this went on for a period of time. He was actively pursuing her, and she just wasn't having it. Until one day, one fateful day, she goes, you know what? You've won me over. Come to my house tonight. My parents can't see you. So Odin, thinking he was going to get lucky, sneaks over to her house. By the way, at this point in time in Legends, he, if I remember correctly, is already married to Freya.
Like that ever stopped him.
Like that ever stopped Zeus. Zara had
Sure.
her head
Oh,
ready to
good
be
Lord.
pissed. In that regard.
Zeus got a Flanderers.
Yeah, well, this is one that Zeus has up on him. He didn't get chased out by a bunch of humans. Here's what happened.
Oh, dear.
So Odin goes around because he's been sniffing at this girl's skirts for ages, and he's like, finally, I'm going to get some. And, oh yeah, no, I'm going to be getting my ass kicked for this. I know it. So he goes up to her window, and he's calling for her, and she's calling for her. And she opens the window. Now, this is a rather rare two-story building, which is unheard of.
Back then.
If you built it against a tree, you could do it.
Yeah.
But he climbed up as best he could to it, and she opens it, gives a whistle, or something similar along those lines, and you hear men shouting, you hear the clamoring of armaments, and you hear dogs rushing. She told her parents what was going on, and she was just sick of it. And her dad goes, then you invite him over, and we'll set him straight. And this is how you're going to do it. So she pretty much told everybody what he was doing, and it got out. And he's just sitting there fuming and pissed because a human woman got the better of him. But it's like, that's kind of what happens when you think with your ding-dong. However, it still shows that there's certain mentalities.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, that's one of the newer versions. So who knows when that version of it was written. There was probably a less discriminatory version earlier.
Yeah. It seems likely. Given Norse actually had pretty progressive views of women for the time period.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Women pretty much had charge of everything, and it was menfolk, you go and fight the thing.
Although the women also went out to fight, which is another big thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was normal in most of those cultures.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when it came to the heavy stuff, the men did the thing typically for like building and what have you. Women organized it.
Yep.
And it worked fairly smoothly. It was actually fairly egalitarian, even after they stopped being as nomadic.
But I was going to say, and I'll say it because I'm less worried about repercussions for saying something regarding Odin, given different faith. Well, I would not call him evil. He is one of the more ruthless gods of the ancient world. I mean, the greatest sin, one of the greatest sins in Viking culture is to break a sworn oath. One of his many titles is Oath Breaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah.
He's complicated on a couple of levels.
Like
The Flaming Front, not really,
didn't
but
say evil. I just said ruthless. You can be good and ruthless.
you can also be complicated at the
Yeah.
same time.
Oh, no question.
I mean, look at Doctor Doom. But that's another verse in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen.
I think there's one thing I usually do when I do this talk, and I feel it's worth doing, which is a quick mention of etymology. Sure. Where words come from. Mostly because people get this wrong, and it's a pet peeve. So the word demon comes from the Greek daemon. Shouldn't be a shock. Some of the earliest pretty much as far as I know, the earliest surviving copies of the New Testament are all in Greek.
A good amount of them, I believe, to a degree, are.
They would have been written in Aramaic. The originals would have been written in Aramaic, but the oldest complete copies are from the 4th century of the entire.
Well, that's where the
New Testament.
first things came from.
But that being said, the word daemon has a complicated set of meanings depending on who you asked. Some of the earlier philosophers saw them as guiding spirits. They gave advice. Socrates was supposed to have a daemon that advised him.
That was the legend. Daemons in and of themselves were essentially neutral to more positively aligned.
That's where I'm getting.
Yeah, no, I get that. You would never really call something that was malicious a daemon by any stretch.
True, to a point. They're generally neutral in the earliest. Later, Homer, for example, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, uses the word daemon basically interchangeably for God.
Well, that was also true, too, because similar to how the Japanese have bunch of different kami, mini gods for local areas and whatnot, daemon, any kind of daemons in the area would essentially be a similar concept in that regard. So you would have the smaller river god who ultimately up the chain answered to...
Yeah. To so-and-so who eventually answers to Poseidon.
And it's the same thing with similar course for Fae.
So you'd have personal daemons?
No, but like the land that you owned.
Yeah.
It's similar to how Kitsune, who were under Inari, were seen as positive omens. However, if your land was not properly blessed and foxes came around, it was a sign of...
Yeah. Which also relates to one of the folklorist theories about the origin of the idea of fairies is basically, from a purely secular, materialistic perspective, these deities of a specific river, this deity of a specific tree or a specific wood. When Christianity took over and there can only be one God, well, no, you have these fairies that are something other than a god, but you still need to pay homage to them in the way that you did the old gods that were the god of the specific tree.
Well, I mean, it's no different than people paying homage to saints and lesser martyrs and what have you.
Yes, because which is absolutely true, because the other thing that religions like to do, aside from turn the last religion's gods into demons, is sometimes they turn the last religion's gods into saints or even other gods.
Which goes back to my point of synchronicity.
Yes, you're absolutely correct point about synchronicity. But the other definition in Greek for a daemon, which comes very, very late, comes from a philosopher by the name of Xenocrates. Xenocrates' definition, and Xenocrates was a pagan. He wasn't a monotheist. He wasn't a Christian, but his definition of daemon was basically a Christian idea of a demon. It was an evil spirit that was working in opposition to the gods.
That particular standpoint, as far as philosophies within Greek culture in and of itself, would not have flown very well.
Again,
And
this is very near the end of Greek Hellenistic paganism. So
understood. And so
yeah,
I have a theory as to why that is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the more likely reason why he has that mindset. Dumbass McGee, as we will now refer to him as for the moment, went about and did nothing but piss off the local daemon. And just like with regular deities, you don't go pissing off the local spirits just because you can or because you're a teenage tool. Because shit's going to follow you. Word will spread. And others will, depending on their connections, just like in the actual pantheon, and then the more official pantheons that's more easily recognized, will defend their own. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, you know, he urinated on a tree that was to an elder nymph or a dryad. And she was like, excuse you. And because he never, you know, gave restitution for that, he was plagued by a bunch of crap his entire life.
Again, from a materialistic perspective, it may have been influenced from coming into contact with Jewish philosophers or coming into contact with Zoroastrian philosophers. There's a number of different possible explanations. I'm by no means trying to discount your explanation. I'm just giving a perspective that doesn't require calling on the supernatural, just like I have for some of the other things we've talked about.
Well, no, and that's completely fair as well. I was actually making the comment to Amisha when you had mentioned Zoroastrianism before, because it's something we actually discussed in my history class, and this wasn't even like an in-depth one. This was like the 101 for ancient Western history. Because Judaism started essentially on its own first, and not a lot of people actually realize this. And it was very much if you do good, good things will come. But after a couple of generations, it just wasn't really sticking all that well. And it actually started dying out until Judaism itself started mingling in with people who were the Zoroastrian faith. I'm like, oh, this balances it out better. And this actually stabilized the faith in itself.
Zoroastrianism, I'm not sure I agree with that interpretation, just given...
This is a very condensed version, and again, this was like the better half of a decade ago.
I know. Well, it's also me being nitpicky with Zoroastrianism.
You nitpicky? That's a thing?
Older than Christianity is not as old as Judaism by a fairly large margin.
Judaism is Christianity's parent. Everybody take note.
But Zoroastrian is in between. I think it had more influence on Christianity than... I would think it had more influence on Christianity than Judaism. But I didn't take class. I don't know.
This is part of the timeline. Because this was before even the Hyksos were over in Egypt and took over for a while. Because that was the whole thing of essentially 12 tribes were there.
No, Zoroastrianism isn't that old. 700 BC.
Zoroastrianism was around the time the Sumerians were still around.
700 BC at the most. I'm quite certain. Zoroastrianism. I'd have to look it up. I'm 99%. Honey, you've got your phone still with power. Will you look up how old Zoroastrianism is? Because I didn't think the prophet Zoroaster, who started Zoroastrianism, was that far back. But
in either case.
To go back to the...
I broke the Kevin. I'm not apologizing.
3,500 years old.
Really?
That might be the earliest time documentation was found of it outside of the main area.
Well, that may be the first time. Well, that also puts it almost... That puts it at 1,500 years before current era, which puts it pretty close to the founding of Judaism.
Yeah.
Which means, okay, I may be completely wrong. But since we're also coming up on the end of the show, let me give the etymology of devil and Satan, and then we'll do the last ad and we'll be out of here. So devil is a much less controversial etymology. It also comes from Greek, from diablos. Diablos means the slanderer or the accuser. Now, the name Satan is, of course, Hebrew, the original name given in the Old Testament being Ha-Satan, so Satan means slanderer or accuser. Ha-Satan meaning the slanderer or the accuser. So basically, Satan, devil is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Satan, which covers the last two etymologies. And while there's plenty more we can and at some point will say about this topic, we are just about out of time. So it's time for us to talk about NordVPN. So
yes.
Chris is in here, so we'll, instead of running and grabbing, let's just wait a little for a change. So no, for those of you who are wondering what a VPN is, it means virtual private network. This is, everybody's concerned these days about internet security. You have businesses trying to sell your information. You have governments spying on you. You have countries like China, for example, where they restrict how much of the internet you can see. A good way to fight all of that, and not to mention, of course, hackers, is a virtual private network. A virtual private network is a network that you sign into, and then from there you go into the greater internet. This gives you all of the normal encryption you get from your normal internet service provider, plus the internet, and then the encryption from the virtual private network you're using.
Which is military grade.
Yeah, in the case of Nord, it's military grade encryption. So good luck on anybody who wants to hack your personal information. Also, one of the nice things, if they're trying to hack, it's going to lead them back to Nord, not back to your computer.
Yeah.
And Nord doesn't, unlike some VPNs, Nord doesn't keep your private information,
Which is great.
which can come in up with a whole lot of other things I don't want to get into because now we're brushing harder on the line of what's legal and what isn't. But it's a good service. It's military grade encryption. It's very affordable.
Yeah.
It's like
they have different plans.
Yeah.
You can start with a month and try it out, or you can get a 3-year plan and it goes down to something like $250 a month.
Yeah. It's, I've got it myself. I love it. Chris, our currently absent co-host, has it and has said more than once that he enjoys it. It's very affordable. You can go to the link in the description, sign up. You'll help out the show as well as help yourself out. Also, since this does wrap it up for tonight, folks, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank you all for getting us to 494 subscribers. We love you. We do it, if you enjoy what we're doing here, like, comment, subscribe. It's the most useful, it's the simplest, freest thing you can do to help out the show.
Yeah.
We're doing several special things for when we hit 500, including Chris's
Chris,
Hot Wing Challenge.
Yes, Chris is going to be essentially doing something similar to Hot Ones. If you haven't looked at them on YouTube, it is some of the funniest things. They're actually opening up season 8 with Gordon Ramsay.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I'm gonna have to look this up.
Yes. But Chris showed it to me, and he goes, "We should do that when we hit 500." And it was essentially when brought to the group, it's like unanimously for the most part, Chris might be doing it by himself.
Yeah.
Which is going to be really mean if so.
I'm getting into drag for the 1000th, so I think he can do the Hot Ones.
I told you, I'm lacing your corset.
Yeah. And yes, if we reach 1,000, I'm going to do the entire show in drag.
And he has to stand up the entire time to show off.
Nice.
Or at least be sitting where he's visible.
Sitting where I'm visible, because with my knee issues, I don't want to stand for an hour straight.
Well, getting up and walking around a little bit is also going to help you
No,
get
it won't. Everyone says that. Trust me from experience, it doesn't. But I can sit where everybody
I'm
can.
talking about while you're in the corset because
Yeah.
something's got stuck if you're sit too long.
Fair enough. But anyway, those are some of the things we got going. Remember, next week we're going to be talking about Momo and various urban legends, creepypastas. I'm not going to say who, and I'm not going to confirm because he's going to try to make it. But we may have a special guest next week.
Yes, we will. I look forward to it.
Who's an old friend of the show's. Remember as well, February 21st, we're going to have Linkara. At some point in the near future, keep an eye on the Facebook and the Twitter and the Instagram. We'll be having the guys from Non Sequitor on. You can also go check to their great channel and check out my interview with them last week. It's up there. But that's going to do it for tonight. This is Kevin Mears saying good night and God bless.
Brian McKinley saying keep your fangs sharp.
I'm Beth, the producer. Live long and prosper, everybody.
Good night, everybody.